So in the recent Warcraft Direct, we got one of the biggest announcements in the game's history, and that player housing is coming with the Midnight expansion. And since the Warcraft Direct, we've also gotten a bunch of developer interviews where we've gotten some more information on how this system is being looked at within Blizzard and what we can expect with this system going forward in the next couple decades of the game. So I want to go over pretty much everything we know about player housing coming to World of Warcraft. Now, I think we can start off by quickly looking at the reveal trailer. Now, this was only 44 seconds, so we didn't get a bunch of information, but we did get to see a potential look at what they're trying to go for. And this teaser pretty much just shows a normal house, which would probably be themed around the Alliance, and more specifically themed around humans in the Alliance. And then we got to see a bunch of the customizations of this house. They showed a bunch of different weapons, a shield, a target dummy. They showed the head of Onyxia, and then they showed some of the Warcraft Rumble miniatures, which I think we actually get a lot more information in this small amount of different customizations than you may initially realize, because besides just being able to hang up different transmogs on your wall, this is also showing that the majority of the collection systems in the game will play a part in your player housing. So you have your weapon transmogs, you have shield transmogs, which seem to indicate that the entirety of the transmog system will play a role in player housing. So you'll probably be able to, in some ways, maybe have armor racks or something like that to also show off your different armor sets. Then they have this head of Onyxia, which obviously shows that achievements are going to play a role in this. I would probably assume that defeating bosses and getting the achievements to defeat those bosses or those dungeons will give you something that you can use in your house. So you go defeat Onyxia, you get that achievement, you can now put the head of Onyxia in your house. And then the Warcraft miniatures seem to show that toys will also be able to be displayed in your house as well. And then you also have the target dummy that could also just be pointing towards toys being available to be placed in your house, like the miniatures, because we do have some toys that allow you to place down temporary target dummies, but this is the normal target dummy that you would find in main cities. So maybe you're just able to put a target dummy in your house and test out your rotation or something while in your house. And the only other unique thing we got to see in this trailer is the Horde and Alliance welcome mats. Everything else we see in this trailer are more kind of generic Warcraft assets. So you have tables with food and candles on them and normal chairs, one chair that the character in the trailer sits in, you have candles, you have bookcases, you have a bed, you have a bearskin rug. So everything else are just kind of normal game assets. But I do think that is also probably showing that everything won't be specifically tied to other collection systems we already have in the game. Like, we don't have a way currently in the game to collect chairs or plates or tables or anything like that. So there is going to be something else that allows you to earn or place all of these other objects. And there could be a lot of ways in which you can earn these. There will probably be a bunch of just base assets depending on what type of house you're in that you're able to place, and maybe getting a bunch of other ones will come through new avenues. They will almost certainly have a lot of new recipes to craft and earn these things through a lot of the professions, and maybe we get another whole new profession tied more specifically to housing as well. Now, past the trailer, there's also been some developer interviews where we don't get any specifics into the system, but we do get a look at how they're thinking about the system being implemented into the game at a top-down view and how they see the system going forward. And the first couple of these are from an interview with Taliesin, which will be linked in the description. And these were just awesome questions about housing in general, but some of the most interesting answers were when specifically asked about garrisons and how they compare to the new housing system. And Ian goes on to say the biggest lesson they learned from garrisons was the risk of having a personal instance environment detracting from the social experiences of the world, and their main goal for player housing is to have a system that feels more social and that doesn't feel like every part of it is trying to keep you within it. Because if you go back to garrisons, you could do a majority of the things you needed to do within the garrison. You could even go fish, gather herbs, and gather mining nodes every single day stay within your garrison. You can make ridiculous amounts of gold through your war table. So you could just do a majority of the stuff you need to do directly within your garrison, which was a massive issue because that means everybody was just sitting in their own instance. And he goes on to say the garrisons were intended to have player power attached to them. And he also went on to say the garrisons were intended to have player power attached to them, also meaning that it wasn't supposed to be a player housing system. It was focused around being a main system for the expansion with a lot of player power attached to it, and that player housing coming in Midnight is not going to have player power attached to it at all. I honestly don't know why a lot of people have been thinking that garrisons were a player housing system, because they really weren't. Even if you go back to a lot of developers talking about the system and showing off the features within the garrisons, none of this really screamed player housing. It was very minimal on player customization, and it was very high on player power and actually having a lot of in-game utility around gathering resources to make gold, or just getting gold, or actually getting gear. So that was a gameplay system. Garrisons weren't player housing. And he was also asked about the teaser trailer, where it was shown to be like a Stormwind themed house or a human themed house. And he said, while that is what was showed in that teaser trailer, that won't be the only option, which is something I would fully expect. Just having one house that's themed around like humans wouldn't really make sense. I'm presuming that they will probably have quite a lot of houses themed as a lot of the different races to start off. And the final piece from the Taliesin interview is that player housing is meant to be an evergreen feature, and their intent is to expand it through future patches and expansions. And as we'll also go over in this video, it seems that this is being seen as the foundation of the system. That is something that's going to be around for a long time, and this is just kind of the start. And I do have some thoughts on that because there are some pretty crazy areas that they could take player housing. Now, in another interview with Holly Longdale, she gave a pretty interesting answer when asked about player housing, and more specifically how they're thinking about the system and if it's going to be evergreen and going into the future. And she answered that housing is going to be a journey for the next couple of decades. So they're very much planning on this being a system that's just here for the long haul. It's going to stick around and live with us. It's your house, it's your home, so we're really committed and dedicated to it, and we've built an entire team around it. Now, that last piece of this answer is really the reason I want to highlight this answer, because they built an entire team around player housing, which is very interesting and also makes me think that there's going to be a lot more development time put into it. Now, I would originally think that they would have to have a full team to actually make this system work, not necessarily for future updates, but more to actually get the underlying elements and code and function of a system like this to actually work and be built. But maybe they would have a smaller team, or it would be put in another team to have future updates. But it's sounding like this team is going to be specifically on player housing for a long time, which also makes me think it's probably going to get a lot more updates than I would originally think, because I would originally think that maybe only during major updates or expansion launches would you get big updates to the player housing system after it's already released. But it more sounds like this is going to be something that's going to be added into most updates, or it's going to be a system that's more regularly updated, kind of something like Mythic Plus being regularly updated, or raids, or anything like that. And then Ian Azikosis also had another interview where he was being asked about player housing, and this was more of a general question, but his answer is also pretty interesting. So his answer was, dare I say, it's our most ambitious feature in a WoW expansion ever. Part of why it's taken such a long time to present it is that we know we couldn't really phone it in and put out a bare bones foundation, even if we were to build on it in the future. I think everything we do needs to be great, but especially something with so much expectation and so much history across the MMO genre. We know it needs to be excellent, and it'll be a foundation for years and years of future development and growth upon these foundations to follow. Now, the reason I wanted to highlight this comment is because they legitimately could have done that, where since this is an evergreen feature, they could have given us a bare bones start. There's a few houses to choose from, and you have a few dozen different things to put in your house or something like that. But it sounds like when you mix in all of these answers, also with the knowledge that this system has been being developed for years at this point, it sounds like the system is actually going to be very expansive in its first iteration. And I think the most prevalent piece of information you can glean from all of these interviews and answers is that player housing is something that is being designed as something that's going to be in the game for pretty much the entirety of the future of WoW. Holly Longdale specifically said decades and decades, so this seems like something that they're specifically developing to just be in the game for the rest of the game's life. And not only that, but with a system like this, if it works in any decent way, which I think it probably will, it will be incredibly popular. Like, I don't think this system comes out and is just not liked by the player base. I think this will be one of the most popular features in the entirety of the game, which also means they will keep putting a lot of resources into it to keep it updated, to keep improving on it, and even adding different versions of it, which I think goes back to them saying that this is a foundation to also build upon, because I could very much see in the future that they release maybe like neighborhoods. So in your, say, housing instance, you could just have a bunch of your friends also build in houses in that area, and then also guild housing, which I think would potentially be even more popular. I think even people that wouldn't care about personal housing would probably care about guild housing much more, because guild housing, you're not just able to customize it with all of your guild mates, but you're also just able to go in there and kind of chill in there and have guild mates just leaving and entering throughout the day. And that would very much add to the elements of being an MMO. You just have this big guild housing where you could just go sit in a chair and your other guildies would just be entering and leaving all throughout the day. So I think player housing is almost guaranteed to be one of, if not the most popular systems in the game's history. And I think it's much more exciting that we're already getting the absolute heads of the game already saying that the system is gonna be in the game for the rest of its history. And this is a foundation that they are specifically building to be expanded upon in whichever direction the players want to take it. So I'm really excited to check these out with midnight, or probably before midnight is actually released. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.